I'm focused on that back half of the Great Commission where he says, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And so from that, I want to talk about the subject, teaching it all. Teaching it all. I love sports documentaries. And right now, airing on ESPN is a series called 9 for 9. And in that series, they are reminding us of some of the most compelling stories about women in sports. A couple of weeks ago, I was arrested by the film Runner, which chronicles the life and the story of Mary Decker Slaney. Mary Decker Slaney. She spent her entire career in search of Olympic gold, but she never won a gold medal. She was one of the most accomplished middle distance runners in American history. She broke 17 world records, 35 United States records. She won gold in 1983 in the World Championships in both the 1,500 meters and in the 3,000 meters. She was so accomplished in her teen years that she was a world-class athlete at 13. At 13, she was running times that would have qualified her to be in the Olympics, but she was too young to go. She was just 13. She had to be 14 years old. And yet, in spite of her thoroughly decorated career, and in spite of the fact that she sought a gold medal in the Olympics for almost 3 decades, she never won one. Mary's life was just sabotaged by misfortune in the Olympic years as they came about. In 1972, I told you she was too young. In 1976, when the Olympics were held, she was injured. In 1980, she didn't get to go to the Olympics. She's in her prime because the U.S. boycotted the Olympics in light of the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. In 1984, still in her prime, this is her year. Everybody thinks she's going to win. She's running better than she's ever run before. And in the 3,000 meters, she trips on the foot of a young lady by the name of Zola Budd. Many people thought that Zola Budd should not have even been there. She was a South African who was running for Great Britain, and they expedited the paperwork. And so she trips over the foot of a young lady who many thought should not have even been in the race. 1988, she's beyond her prime. She doesn't win a medal at all. Doesn't win gold, doesn't win silver. She doesn't win bronze. In 1992, way beyond her prime, she's still seeking to win the gold. She doesn't even qualify for the Olympic team. 1996, she still got the gold in her system. And she decides, I'm going to try again. And to everybody's amazement, she makes the Olympic team, but well beyond her best years. She doesn't even make it out of the qualifying rounds. All of her career, she has one goal in mind. She wants to win a gold medal in the Olympics. But in spite of everything that she was allowed to experience, in spite of all of the victories, Mary Decker Slaney never won a gold medal. Friend, when it comes to God, are you living for the gold? What does it mean to have a gold medal life? What is the Christian's highest achievement? What is it that makes us world-class disciples? Well, we see that in the text that we're reading today. To go for the goal is to determine in your life that you are going to make disciples. Now, the text is clear. The text teaches us the making of a disciple involves more than just leading somebody to Christ. It involves being able to coach them on how to live for Christ. And so it's more than just sharing my faith. It's being able to transfer a faith that works to somebody else. And Jesus says, I'm looking to you to teach them everything that I have commanded you. And so our purpose in the earth, I told you I know your purpose, is not only to make disciples, but Felicia, to make disciples who make disciples. Who make disciples. Who make disciples until Christ is known in every quadrant of the world. And so this is what it looks like to go for the goal. Jesus says, I want you to be somebody who can tell it all. Somebody who can coach someone else in the faith. Now, we see this, and we see it clearly in the example of the original disciples. Now, I need you to get the scene here, and I told you this on last week. What we see in this passage is the last act of discipleship for the original 12 disciples. It's 11 now because Judas decided that he wanted silver instead of a savior. It's 11 now. And he tells them, listen, I have spent 3 years teaching you how to live for me. 3 years teaching you how to share and train with others. Train others on how to live for me. But now you're ready to do it without my supervision. And so I'm going back to my Father. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to now go do for others the very thing that I did for you. Friend, that's going for the goal. And anything less is shooting beneath the level of high achievement that God has for every one of us. This is what it means to go for the goal. Now, the disciples, in the space of 3 years, I want you to see your story and their story. In the space of 3 years, they went from being non-followers, non-disciples, to being new disciples, deciding to follow Jesus, to being growing disciples. They were being taught how to live for him. They were being taught how to lead others to walk with him and live for him. And ultimately, we see the last stage. At this point, they are reproducing disciples. They are disciple makers. And this is the pattern. God says, I want you to go from being a non-disciple to a new disciple, to a growing disciple, to a disciple maker. These are the stages of following Christ. Now, last week I gave you a picture of the spiritual journey that reflected on how God works in our lives to bring us to a place of full compliance to his will. But we're zooming out today and we're saying, what are the general categories of discipleship? And they begin at the first step of being a non-disciple. I want you to see this. Somebody in this room today, maybe you are not a follower of Christ. And the great need of a non-disciple is to make Jesus his or her leader now. Non-disciples don't know it, but they are walking in rebellion against the God of heaven. Jesus said, all authority has been given unto me. And because I've got authority, the only appropriate response to me is for you to follow my leadership. And so a non-disciple, the great need that they have is to make Jesus leader. Then there are new disciples. The great need that a new disciple has is to develop a new tribe. They need a new family. The reason why many new disciples never grow is because they want to walk with Jesus and hang out with the same crew. And they don't understand that bad company over time increasingly corrupts good morals. Friend, you can't hang out with the same crew. Jesus said, if your mother is talking against me, you got to choose me over your mother. All authority has been given unto me. And then we move from being new disciples to being growing disciples. The great need of a growing disciple is to obey over time, to not just pick and choose, but to obey in every quadrant of his or her life. It's full surrender. And it's through this full surrender that we begin to see what it's like to walk with God. We begin to experience the benefit of what it's like to live for God. And a lot of us never make it out of the growth stage of discipleship. Because we're picking and choosing, our growth is awkward. Our growth is unbalanced. We're growing hugely in one area, not growing in another area. And we don't see the symbiotic relationship between obedience in every quadrant of life. We compartmentalize God. And we never grow to the place of being able to reproduce our faith. Here's the last stage, reproducing disciple. This is one who is coaching and are growing disciples. The growing disciple is one who is being taught in a small group. Growing disciples don't just come to church. They realize that they need constant input from the people of God and from the Word of God. They need to constantly rely on the Spirit of God to be the people that God has called them to be. Then that reproducing disciple, this is one coaching new or growing disciples to be fully surrendered and ultimately to become what I'm calling disciple makers. What do they do this? They do this through small groups. They do it like Jesus did it, whether through one organized in the church. Maybe you've got a group of believers on your job, 2 or 3 of them. They are new to the faith, and you're going to coach them on how to walk their faith out. It could be something formal. It could be something informal. I certainly am to do this for my children, for members of my family, because what good would it do them if I teach them to be independent in this life, but to be isolated from God in eternity? I haven't done anything of eternal worth unless I've taught them about God. And so this is the reproducing disciple. And this is the purpose of God for my life. My purpose is not to be an accountant. My purpose is not even to be a preacher. My purpose is to make disciples who make disciples, and I do that through accounting, and I do that through preaching, and I do that through the various things that I do. The other things are my assignment. This is my purpose. I'm on my way to making a difference in the kingdom. This is the great task of the church, and therefore it's the great task of every believer. Now, here's what I want to demonstrate to you on today. I want to demonstrate to you that every one of you in here can participate in the task of teaching it all. Everyone in here on some level has the ability to become a disciple maker. Not only do you have the ability, whatever ability that you lack, Jesus said, I'll be there to support you. Listen to the text. He says, and I will be with you always to the very end of the age. Friend, if you don't feel God's power, the question is, are you doing things that he supports? Because when you do the mission of God, and when you and I arrange our lives around those things that God has arranged heaven around, he says, I will be present with you. I will support you. I will give you the power. When it comes to belief in ourselves, we tend to be doubters. We tend to be agnostics. But I want you to see, your goal is to go for the gold. In going for the gold, you're seeing that you have been placed on the earth for the glory of God and to teach people about him. Now, what makes me so confident that you can do this? I'm so glad you're interested. I'm so glad you're interested. I'm very confident because I understand what this word teaching means. And many of you in this room, that word teaching, if you're not careful, it will throw you off. It will throw you off. Look at somebody near you and say, don't be thrown off. So you're already thrown off because you've already classified yourself as a non-teacher. You don't even like talking that much. Don't be thrown off. The truth is, on some level, all of us are teaching something all the time. I guarantee you, if you stop and think about it, you're teaching somebody in your life. The question is, what's the curriculum? You're teaching somebody right now. And so, don't be thrown off by the word teaching. He says teach them to obey everything. But here's what I need you to get. Teaching it all does not mean go teach the whole Bible. It doesn't mean you got to learn every verse in the Bible, understand the historicity of every book in the Bible. It doesn't mean that you got to go teach systematic theology. Listen to what the text says. It says, teach them to obey. And so these are things that have to do with the core of the Christian faith. Things that we all do. Things that we're all supposed to do. And so when he says teaching them to obey, he's talking about teaching them how to do the life. Teaching them to pray. Teaching them to love. Teaching them to forgive. Teaching them to worship. Teaching them what it looks like to have a personal time of devotion with God. Teaching them how to study the Bible. These are things that as believers we all do. They represent the core of the faith. He's not saying go teach some ancillary tenet of theology or teach them the Song of Solomon. He says, I want you to teach them to obey those things that make up the core of the faith. And friend, if you don't know how to do that, why not? Why not? These are things that Christians do. This is what makes our lives distinctively Christian. Teaching it all does not mean going somewhere and waxing eloquent. Now, some of y'all are afraid that God's going to call you to preach if you get serious about it. That's not what he's talking about here. He's going to call you to preach, going to send you to Africa. Forever. I mean, you're not going on a mission trip forever. He might send me forever. But it does not mean going somewhere and waxing eloquent. He's not talking about preaching. He's not talking about lecture-style teaching. Those things that only a few of us can do. Now, these things are part of the discipleship process, but only those who are gifted to do those things. But that's not what he's talking about in this passage. He's talking about teaching people in the sense of coaching them, in the sense of training them. He's talking about teaching from a relational context in simple, plain, practical ways with a casual tone. These are things that we all can do. Number three, here's the third one. Teaching it all does not mean what you say is more important than how you live. Jesus didn't teach them to obey just by talking. He taught them to obey through means that we all use, to encourage and to inspire and to teach others. He not only taught them, he would show them. He would do things with them. He would allow them to do things, and then he would debrief them afterwards. He would deploy them to do it alone. And so it's not just about what we say, it's about the way we roll. It's about how we live. Teaching it all does not mean teach something we don't know. Now I want you to look at the text again. He says, teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. I read that too fast, didn't I? I said it too fast. Let me say it slow. Teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And so here's what he's saying. He's saying, I want you to go teach them what I've already taught you. I'm not asking you to go teach something you don't know. And you say, well, PC, I hadn't learned everything that Jesus wants me to learn. I don't engage in the habits, the spiritual disciplines as I should. Well, then get busy and do that. And then when you finish, when you get to the point where you're able to transfer that, Jesus said, now I want you to go teach what you already know. And so let me summarize. I've been saying a lot of things. Let me summarize. Here's what it means. Teaching it all. It simply means to teach others to do what you do. All it means is to train people to live the way you're already living. It's showing people how to arrange your life around priorities that are truly yours. And because it's something you're already doing, it's something that you can do. This is something that all of us can go for. We can all go for the goal. It may take us some time to get there. But once we do it, we can transfer it. Who am I talking to in the room? Yeah. Once we do it, we can transfer it. Now, some of you are still protesting in your spirit. I see it on your face. You're still protesting in your spirit. You protest too much. And you're saying to yourself, Galen, but you don't know. You don't know what's up. I really, really, really can't do it. You know what convinces us that we can't do things? Sin. Sin. Sin robs us of confidence. Just not walking with God. But here, I want to show you that you can do it. I want to show you that you can do it. We see it all the time. People always can transfer what they do. Now, it is impossible for you to teach somebody things you